The sun dipped low on the horizon, casting long shadows over the bustling city of Tamale. The air was thick with the scent of roasting maize and the sound of market traders haggling over prices. Amidst the chaos of the day's end, Kwame stood at the edge of the city, his gaze fixed on the northern sky where clouds of dust swirled like a gathering storm. The message he received earlier still echoed in his mind, summoning him to return home, to a place he had not visited in over a decade. Kwame had left Tamale as a young man, eager to escape the confines of tradition and pursue a life in the city. Accra had been his new home, a city of opportunities, where he had built a life far removed from the ancestral lands of his forefathers. Yet, here he was, standing on the brink of a journey back into his past, compelled by a letter delivered by an old family friend. Kwame, return at once. There is something you must know about your heritage. Time is running out. The words were simple, yet they carried an urgency that left no room for doubt. His heart pounded as he stepped onto the dusty path leading out of Tamale, his mind racing with questions. What could possibly await him back in the village? Why now, after all these years? As he journeyed deeper into the savannah, the landscape grew more familiar, each bend in the road stirring memories long buried. The wind whispered through the tall grasses, carrying with it the distant echoes of drums and chants that once filled his childhood nights. The world around him seemed to close in, as if the land itself were aware of his presence, urging him forward. The sun had dipped below the horizon when Kwame arrived at the village of Banjong. The village was eerily silent, its narrow streets deserted, save for a few stray goats that wandered aimlessly. The once vibrant community where he had played as a child now seemed shrouded in an unnatural stillness. A shiver ran down his spine as he approached the compound of his family. His father's house, an old mud structure, stood at the far end of the village. The walls were cracked, and the thatched roof sagged in the middle, a testament to years of neglect. As he stepped through the wooden gate, a figure emerged from the shadows. It was his uncle, Alhaji Ibrahim, the man who had taken over as the head of the family after Kwame's father had passed away. Kwame, Alhaji Ibrahim greeted him with a voice as dry as the Harmattan wind. His face was etched with lines of worry, his eyes clouded with an emotion Kwame could not decipher. Uncle, Kwame replied, struggling to keep his voice steady. Why did you call me here? Alhaji Ibrahim motioned for him to follow and led him to a small room at the back of the compound. Inside, the air was heavy with the scent of incense and something else, something metallic and unpleasant. Kwame's heart raced as his uncle pointed to a chest in the corner, covered in a layer of dust. Your father kept this hidden for many years, Alhaji Ibrahim began, his voice a mere whisper. He said it contained our family's most valuable secrets, secrets that could only be passed on to the rightful heir when the time was right. Kwame's hands trembled as he approached the chest. It was old, the wood darkened with age, and the metal lock rusted. With a deep breath, he knelt beside it and slowly lifted the lid. Inside, wrapped in a faded cloth, lay a bundle of ancient documents and a small, intricately carved wooden figure. The documents were brittle, the ink faded, but as Kwame carefully unfolded them, he saw that they were written in his grandfather's hand. They spoke of an ancient pact made generations ago, a pact that bound their family to the protection of a sacred relic, the wooden figure he now held in his hands. The figure was of a man with an expression of both agony and strength, his arms outstretched as if holding back an unseen force. This relic, Alhaji Ibrahim said, is known as the Kunutiji, the guardian of the threshold. It was entrusted to our family by the elders of the Dagomba people, who believed it held the power to protect the land from evil forces. But with great power comes great responsibility, and the relic must never fall into the wrong hands. Kwame stared at the figure, his mind reeling. How could something so small hold such power? He felt the weight of generations pressing down on him, the responsibility that now rested squarely on his shoulders. Why did you not tell me this before? Kwame asked, his voice thick with emotion. Why wait until now? Alhaji Ibrahim sighed deeply. Your father believed that you were not ready, that you needed to find your own path before accepting your heritage. But things have changed, Kwame. There are those who seek the Kunutiji, those who would use it for their own purposes. They have already begun to search, and it is only a matter of time before they find us. Kwame's heart pounded in his chest. The village's eerie silence now took on a more sinister meaning. Were they already here, watching, waiting for the right moment to strike? What must I do? Kwame asked, gripping the figure tightly. You must take the Kunutiji to the sacred grove in the forest, where it was first blessed by the elders, Alhaji Ibrahim instructed. There, you will receive further guidance. But be careful, Kwame. The journey will not be easy, and the path is fraught with danger. Kwame nodded, determination hardening his resolve. He had come back to Tamale seeking answers, and now he had them. His journey through heritage had just begun, and it would be a journey of life and death. As night fell, Kwame set out towards the forest, the Kunutiji safely tucked in a leather pouch at his side. The wind howled through the trees, and the darkness pressed in from all sides. Every rustle of leaves, every crack of a twig made his heart leap. He knew he was not alone, that unseen eyes were watching him from the shadows. The path to the sacred grove was treacherous, winding through dense underbrush and over jagged rocks. Kwame pushed forward, his senses heightened, his every step measured. The moon provided little light, but he had no choice but to trust his instinct. Suddenly, a piercing cry echoed through the forest, followed by the sound of footsteps rapidly approaching. Kwame's breath caught in his throat as he turned to see figures emerging from the darkness, 3 men, their faces hidden beneath masks, their eyes gleaming with malevolent intent. Give us the relic, and we will spare your life, one of the men hissed, his voice dripping with menace. Kwame's mind raced as he backed away, his hand clutching the pouch. There was no way he could outrun them, and he had no weapon to defend himself. But surrendering the Kunutiji was not an option. I cannot do that, Kwame replied, his voice surprisingly steady. This relic does not belong to you. The men advanced, and Kwame knew he had only moments to act. He reached into the pouch and pulled out the Kunutiji, holding it high above his head. A sudden surge of energy coursed through him, as if the relic itself were alive, responding to his call. The leader of the masked men lunged at Kwame, but before he could reach him, a blinding light burst forth from the Kunutiji, illuminating the entire forest. The men cried out in pain, shielding their eyes from the intense light, and in that moment of confusion, Kwame ran. He sprinted through the forest, the light from the Kunutiji guiding his way. The cries of his pursuers grew fainter as he neared the sacred grove. Finally, he broke through the trees and into a clearing, where a circle of ancient stones stood, bathed in moonlight. Kwame collapsed to his knees, breathless and exhausted, but alive. He placed the Kunutiji in the center of the stones, as his uncle had instructed, and as he did, the light from the relic intensified, bathing the entire clearing in a warm, golden glow. In that moment, Kwame felt the presence of his ancestors, their voices whispering on the wind, their strength flowing through him. He had fulfilled his duty, protecting the relic as his family had done for generations. The journey had been perilous, but it had also brought him back to his roots, reconnecting him with the land and the people who had shaped his destiny. As the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, Kwame stood and looked out over the forest. The danger had passed, but the journey was far from over. He knew that he would return to Tamale, not as the man who had fled his heritage, but as the guardian of a legacy that would endure for generations to come. The Kunutiji would remain safe, its power a beacon of hope and protection for the people of the north. And Kwame, once lost to the city's temptations, had found his true path, a journey through heritage that had brought him back to where he truly belonged.